everyone, I'm Gertie and welcome to episode 2 of Gertie's World. If you're new here, what we're doing every month is bringing you brand new, exciting sewing content every month here on YouTube. And we also have a Patreon where we're doing exclusive episodes. So if you like this, please check us out on Patreon at Gertie's World. Okay, so what we're going to do today, I'm very excited about. I'm going to be showing you how to make the Liz dress. And again, just if you're new here, I have a company called Charm Patterns by Gertie. This is my independent sewing pattern company. We published a pattern called the Liz dress in 2019, which everyone loved. We worked on it for a long time. It's a beautiful shelf bust style. So that is based on a dress that Elizabeth Taylor wore. That's why it's called the Liz dress. So I'm really excited to show you today how to make it. I'm gonna just direct you to the mannequin over here. This is actually the original vintage dress that inspired the Liz dress. I found this on Etsy and I just love the style of it. It's a beautiful print too, obviously. But what's really fabulous about this dress and what makes it so special is the bust line. So again, this is called a shelf bust, really common, very coveted style for people who love 50s dresses. It has a strap that kind of goes under the band like this and forms this little shelf. And then the bust line, and this is like this is like a bra-like bust line here. So I'm going to show you how to construct this. Has these beautiful pleats, and then this sets into a midriff. If you look at the back, and this was a little too small for the mannequin, but you get the idea. This strap continues into this cute little band on the back and it goes to a center V-back. And it has this beautiful full skirt. So what we did at Charm Patterns, you can see our version over here, was we love to take vintage inspiration. So I love this original vintage dress so much that I really studied it and figured out how to make it. And we drafted our own pattern and graded it into 50 sizes. So this goes in dress sizes 2 through 20 with separate A through H cups. So obviously bust fit is a huge part of making this dress for yourself. Those cup sizes are really going to help you get a beautiful fit in the bust. So our version is very similar, but we did make a few changes to modernize it and make it fit ladies from all sizes, 2 to 20, A through H cup. And we just kept the same beautiful fit and flare silhouette. And I'm going to show you today the most challenging parts of making this dress. So this is not a beginner project. I would say it's solidly intermediate. I'm going to be referring you along in the Liz dress instruction booklet as we go along. So do keep that handy because it's really going to help guide you. These instructions are super comprehensive. So just follow along with me there. I have made this many times in like quilting cottons and like lawn fabrics. Liberty lawns are a great place to start. This is a Hawaiian batik with a little crinkle texture. So for your first Liz dress, I would say definitely use a cotton fabric. Make it easy on yourself. So start there. I am not making it easy on myself today. I have made so many of this dress in cottons that I wanted to make what I'm calling my Debbie Reynolds fantasy dress today. If you know anything about what we do at Charm Patterns, you know that feeling the fantasy is a big concept for us. So I always like to have a fantasy in mind when I sew. And this dress I'm sewing on camera today is inspired by a movie with Debbie Reynolds called Give a Girl a Break. And it's actually a terrible movie, so I don't really recommend that you watch it, but the costumes by Helen Rose are out of this world. And Debbie Reynolds wore this gorgeous ombre chiffon dress that looks a lot like the Liz dress. And I've had a yellow ombre chiffon in my stash for probably 8 to 10 years now. So I finally busted it out. And you can see I've constructed the skirt already. So it has a yellow that goes down to an ivory peachy color at the bottom. And then the bodice is going to be a darker yellow. So you'll see when we go over to the table and I start showing you how this is going to be constructed. So this is very much a fantasy dress, like I said, and my construction is going to be a little bit different from yours if you're not using chiffon. And like I said, I hope you're not for your first dress. But there is a lot to talk about, so let's get right into the construction introduction. Oh, here's Mr. Jingle. So if you know my cat Henry loves to be on camera, and here he is with us today. Hi, Henry. Okay, everyone, we're gonna go over to the cutting table, and I'm just gonna give you kind of the lay of the land with this pattern. Okay, everyone, so we are going to get started talking about supplies. First thing you wanna get is your cat, okay? Because I'm sure Henry is gonna come in very handy today, walking all over my chiffon. Right, Henry? Yeah, you just hang out there. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about, you need your pattern, okay? Oh, Henry. Are you going to make this difficult for Mommy? Let's put you down now. Ooh. There we go. Okay, let's see how long that lasts. He's very hungry, so he's going to be bugging us for snacks all day. Okay, everyone, you've got your pattern, you've got your Liz dress, all right? Make sure you're following along in your booklet. A couple other things, you're gonna need your fashion fabric, of course. As I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a chiffon dress, which meant that I also needed an underlay. So if you see here, that is a charmeuse underlay. And then, so you're gonna probably just be doing one outer layer, right? So just one layer, your cotton or whatever you're using. And then you're gonna need a muslin underlining, okay? So all these quantities are in the booklet. You're gonna need a muslin underlining, and then you're also going to need a lining fabric. I'm using this really beautiful silk and cotton blend called Radiance. I love this for lining. Okay, a couple other things to have on hand. A zipper, 18 inches is good. I think that's what the pattern says. Yep, 18 inches. Good scissors. Please don't try to do this dress with crappy scissors. I really like Kai brand. These dressmaking shears are great. They're not expensive and they're super sharp. And then also a pair of little embroidery scissors can come in handy for small detail work. Good pins, all right? You're gonna wanna have silk pins. I really like these Japanese ones. I can link you to the source for these as well as the scissors. Some sort of marking tool. I'll show you, I'm actually just using a pencil today because I'm gonna be marking on my muslin. And then make sure you have the correct machine needle for your fabric. So this is not actually the one I wanna use, but I wanna use a really small needle for my chiffon, so like a 70-10 size. Okay, so you can see I've already started constructing my dress. I'm not going to show you every single step today just because it would take us way too long. I'm going to show you the most complicated parts to really help you get through this dress on your own so you can be successful. Okay, so we are looking at the bodice here. I have already done these first few bodice steps on page 23. I have sewn my back dart, okay, through my muslin and my outer layers. I've sewn my midriff pieces together. There are my front princess seams and my side seams. So I have one big piece here. And it's kind of cool now. You can see how this is going to come together. This is sort of the cradle where the shelf bust is going to be set. And not quite yet, but we are going to be looking at the cup construction. So I have one side ready to go, and then I'm going to show you how those pieces come together to form that cup. But the most important thing we want to do now is the strap. So I feel like the strap has caused a little bit of confusion for people, and I will tell you that it caused confusion for me too when I looked at that vintage dress and thought, how the heck did they sew this? So what you're going to have is two strap back pieces that look like this, and you probably recognize this shape going down the V-neck of the back bodice. You're going to have two of those, and then you're going to have two front strap pieces that look like this. Okay, so you need to cut these out for your cup size. The curve is different depending on what cup size you're making, so make sure you're using the correct cup size. So this gets seamed together at center front, and then this goes over the shoulder and gets seamed to the strap back. Okay, so I'm going to show you how these come together. Keep in mind you're also going to need a second set of strap pieces. And I've sewn this entire one here. Let's get these out of the way. Okay, so here's my center front seam, and then my strap back. So it's sewn in one long piece. You can see that my pieces are all basted together. You're going to need to baste your underlining to your fashion fabric, so keep that in mind. I did mine by hand because of these slippery fabrics, so that's why you can see the pink basting through there. Okay, so let's talk about how these strap pieces come together. first thing you're going to do is take your 2 strap fronts, and again, just to be really clear, you're going to have one set that's interfaced, I'm sorry, not interfaced, underlined with a muslin, and then your second set is not underlined. Okay, so the underlined set, the one with the muslin on it, this is going to become the outer strap, or the one that sits closer to the world, not closer to your body, if that makes any sense. Okay, so first seam we need to do, right sides together. We're going to put these straps together at center front. So I'm pinning this here. I'm going to sew right there. Press it open. After I do that, I'm going to put the shoulder seams together. So the back straps are going to get laid on top of the front straps, right sides together, like so. And I'm going to pin along the shoulder seams, like that. I always like to put my pins perpendicular to the raw edge because it makes it very easy. Just pull them out while I'm sewing and put them back in my little wrist pin cushion. Okay, so I'm going to sew along there, press open, sew along there, press open, and then I'm going to come back and you'll see I have one long strap piece. All right, everyone, I've got 2 sets of straps assembled here. So the one on the bottom here is my strap lining. That's the one that does not have the muslin underlining. The one on top does have the muslin underlining, okay? So you can see these are the shoulder seams and this is the center front seam. So we have 2 really long kind of U-shaped pieces that we are now going to sew together. So just so you can follow along, we're on page 24 of the booklet. This is the strap section, and we are on step 2 now. Okay, so this is, I will say, the most confusing part of the book. So if you get this part, you are golden from here on out. Okay, so let's put these together, right sides together. And we're also going to go over the marks that you need to make sure that you have on your straps. So again, in the last section, I talked about using pencil, and the reason for that is it just shows up really well. Here are my circle marks, and these are really important. You're gonna have a circle mark on your back strap right there, and a circle mark on your front strap. So, and then one over here and one on the other back strap. So you should have 4 circles. These are crucial. Also make sure that you have all your notches clipped. Okay, so what's gonna happen next is we're gonna pin these straps together. And on the upper edge of the strap, we're gonna sew from this circle around here to the other circle. This stays open back here, all right? Then on the lower edge of the strap, we're gonna sew from the center back, this edge over here, all the way to our circle here. Then we're gonna back stitch. We're gonna leave this open. Then we're gonna start stitching at this circle and then finish off at the very edge. Okay, so I feel like when I was figuring this dress out, planning the construction, how it was all going to go together, the most confusing thing for me to write in the instructions was what stays open and what gets sewn on this strap. And you'll see why it's this way later, because part of it gets set into the bodice and part of it forms that nice finished band. So that's why we're doing this. Okay, but for now, I'm just going to work on matching my raw edges here and pinning together in the sections where I will be sewing. So make sure that your shoulder seams match. Just as a general tip, you always want to match your match points and then fill in pins in between. You don't want to start at one match point and then continue to the other match point, because then your match points may not match. Okay, so now I'm just filling in, and that kind of helps distribute any ease if there is any ease in there, but there shouldn't be in these straps. Okay, so I'm going to pin to this circle. And now I'm going to pin the lower edge together. So I'm just going to keep working on this, and then we'll go over to the machine and I'll show you which edges of this I'm going to be sewing. I'm all pinned, okay? So I just want to repeat that what I'm going to be sewing, actually I missed a pin here. What I'm going to be sewing on the upper edge is I'm going to be starting at this circle. I'm going to sew at 5/8 of an inch all the way around until I get to this circle. Then I'm going to back stitch and stop. Okay, so I'm not sewing from here to here on either back strap. And then on the lower edge of the strap, I'm going to start at center back, again, stitching at 5/8 of an inch, stitching, 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 until I get to this circle. Then I'm going to back stitch and stop. And then I'm going to pick it up again, leaving this all open here, pick it up again at this circle, stitching, 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 until I get to that center back edge. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the machine now, and that's what we're going to do. All right, I'm at my usual 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I'm starting on the upper edge of the strap here at the circle. And remember, you're using 5/8 of an inch seam allowances for all seams in this dress. Just make sure that your shoulder seams stay pressed open. Now you can see that some of these basting stitches are going to show, and that's okay because I'm going to remove all of these, so don't worry about that. So I'm coming up to center front now, and I'm just going to keep stitching until I get to the circle on the other side of the upper strap, on the back strap to be very specific. Okay, I'm at the next shoulder seam. I'm coming up to that circle, and that is where I'm going to back stitch and break my stitching. Okay. Okay, so that's it for the upper edge of the strap. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around so I can be sewing from this edge, and I'm sewing the lower edge of the strap from center back to the circle on the lower edge of the front strap. Okay, I'm coming up on that circle mark. So this is where I'm going to stop, back stitch, break my stitching. I'm leaving this edge open, so I'm just going to find my start point, my next circle over here, and then I'm going to restart stitching at this circle. And I'm going to keep stitching here until I get to the other back edge. So I can just finish this off. Now that we're done stitching, I'm going to go over to my nice big flat surface where we can talk about trimming these seam allowances and grading them and doing any clipping or notching. The next thing that we're going to do is clip to our circles. Okay, so you're going to clip as close as you can to your stitching without clipping through your stitching so that you have a nice deep clip there. So all 4 circles we're going to do this. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is grade our seam allowances. So that just means trimming one of our seam allowances so that it is shorter than the other. And in the case of this, your shorter one is going to be the lining. And actually you can see I got a seam kind of caught here, so I can go back and fix that later. But my lining layers, I'm going to want to be the shorter seam allowance. So I'm going to go around the lining and trim these to about, I like to say between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, so 3/16 of an inch, so that sounds super nitpicky. Okay, so you're gonna do that on the lining, and then on the outer strap, the one with the underlining, you're going to trim that to about 1/8 of an inch wider than the lining. Okay, so like that. Okay, so I'm going to do that anywhere that I stitched. Okay, so that, just to be super clear here, anywhere that we didn't stitch and the edges are still open, you're not going to trim or grade or touch those seam allowances. I'm just going to focus my efforts now on the seam allowances where we just stitched. So do your grading and we will come back and talk about clipping and notching. I've done all of my grading and now I'm just going to do some clipping. So you always clip inner curves and notch outer curves. So we have both here. So the upper edge of the strap, I'm going to do some clips about every 1/2 inch. And you really only need to do this around the curviest parts. So I wouldn't worry about anywhere that it starts getting a little straight, like beyond the shoulder seam. And you may notice I have a lot of basting in here. I'm just going to worry about that later. So you can always take your basting out later. But just around this very curvy inner edge, the upper edge of the strap. And again, I have a lot of layers in here. I have one more layer than you will have, right? Because I had that sheer chiffon outer layer, so I also needed the charmeuse to give it some opacity. So you're seeing more layers than you'll be seeing in your dress. Because you probably are not sewing this in chiffon. I definitely wouldn't recommend that if it's your first time sewing the dress. Okay, so that is my inner curve all clipped, and now we want to notch our outer curve, so around here. So you don't need to do a ton of these because this isn't super curvy, so maybe about every inch. Okay, so I'm going to continue like this, getting little yellow triangles everywhere. And I'm not really going to worry right there, that is not very curved. Just really this back strap. I'm just going to, about every inch. It's really not a dramatic curve here at all. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is turn this right side out. So you have an open edge here. You can just kind of start to turn this. And if you have like a loop turner or a fast turn, which I'm just realizing right now, I'm looking at Malaysia, we left it at the studio, but this isn't such a difficult thing to turn. We should be able to do it with just our hands, right, Malaysia?
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So I'm probably just going to keep going in here like this. It's convenient that you don't have to do the whole strap at once. You can start in the middle and pull each back edge out. Yep, look, all worked out. One of those panic moments on camera. Okay, so same thing on the other side. It's looking like a nice long banana right now. It's very banana-y looking, right? It's a banana-like strap. There we go. Okay. Our next step, and I'm going to explain it here flat before we go over to the machine. Our next step is going to be to understitch the lining anywhere that it's open. So here in this lower edge, I'm going to be understitching right here between the circles. And then I'm going to go on each side, I'm going to understitch the back where it's open. So I'm going to be stitching right here on each side. Okay, so we're still on step 2. That's kind of a long, complicated step. But after we do this, we're going to press it, and then we will be able to attach this to the bodice. All right, so I'm going to start at the center part of the strap, so this sort of like under bust curve. I'm going to open out the lining of the strap as far as I can. So you'll see this is where the circle was, so we're going to be a little restricted there. I'm going to open it out as far as I can. I'm going to make sure the seam allowances, just with my hands here, I'm going to make sure the seam allowances are underneath the strap lining side. And now we are going to understitch the strap lining. So just get this opened out as far as you can, hold it nice and taut. Let me just get this thread to the back. Nice and taut, and then I'm going to be stitching like a kind of scant 1/8 of an inch away from that seam line. Make sure you're not catching anything else underneath there. Okay, and this understitching is what is going to help the edge of the strap look nice and crisp. So there's our center front seam, which goes right at center bust. And as I'm understitching, I'm always checking the seam allowances. I want to make sure that I'm catching them in my stitching. So they need to be flipped over to the lining side, okay? And you can feel them with your finger. So that's how I know that they're there. And then I'm also using my right hand to kind of sweep them under to the lining side. And just go as far as you can. You're going to get to a point where it feels really difficult to get into that little tiny spot, and that's because you're getting close to the circle where it's stitch closed. So I'm just going to back stitch, and I'm going to trim that. And now I'm going to understitch each of the back edges. So same thing, from center back on both sides. I'm going to open out my strap lining, hold it nice and taut, make sure my seam allowances are underneath the lining. And I'm stitching just about a scant 1/8 of an inch away from the seam line. Again, you see some basting stitches there, and you can always pull those out later. And again, it's going to get a little tricky. I'm in a tight spot here because I'm coming up to where the circle mark was and where the strap closes. So I'm just going to back stitch there. And now we just have one more section of understitching to do, which is the other center back. Now this side's a little weird because the lining side is going to be to the left of your needle now, so just keep that in mind, and you are going to be stitching just to the left. So now I want my seam allowances to be going that way. Okay, going as far as I can. I'm going to stop about right there. Okay, back stitch. And the next thing, and this is the thing you almost always do immediately after understitching, is I'm going to press. So let's take this to the ironing board. Woo, okay. I like to press from the side with the understitching. So I'm just going to roll my understitching out to the edge. So you're doing a motion like this with your hands, just pressing that way, taking the edge and rolling it outwards. And now I am pressing that edge. I'm on a fairly low heat because of the chiffon. It does get, it can get damaged and puckery pretty quickly. So, oh, and actually I think I went to auto off there, as always happens. Okay, so I'm just going to just give this a little bit more time, but you can see now it's starting to lay nice and flat. And there, that's a nice finished edge of our strap. Okay, so anywhere that it's open, this is going to get basted together. So these sections here where our straps are open, you can actually start to pin these shut, if you like that, because next thing we're gonna do is go to the machine and baste them. Okay, but I need to go around my entire strap now, press the whole thing. Of course, there are sections where there is no understitching because both sides of the strap are closed. So on these sections, just roll the edges, the seam line edges out to the edge as far as you can, okay? You don't want it to kind of collapse in on itself. So you want to just continue that rolling motion that you do with the understitching and roll it out to the edge. I'm gonna have to do the same thing on this edge as well. And I've even done, used like a ruler to get in there and really push the seam line out, because you want it to look nice and pretty on the edge there. Okay, it's a long strap. I'm at my center here. So now you've seen me do one entire half of the strap, so I feel like you should be getting the idea by now. So I'll just continue with this pressing, rolling my understitching out to the edge, pinning these open edges together so that we can baste them next. My strap is all basted shut and complete, and now we are ready to pin and baste it to the bodice. So let's go over to the table so I can show you how to do this flat. Here's my strap, and now I have my completed outer bodice here. So hopefully you can kind of see how this is going to go together. This part, this curved open edge here, is going to get set into the underbust cradle on the bodice. So you can start, and there also, I just want to mention that there are notches and there are some marks to help you here. You should have circles on your side front bodice where this finished edge will match. But let's start with our notches first. The notches will match the princess seams on the midriff, so you can start there. And it's very flat now, but this is going to start to take a three-dimensional shape. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. And want you guys to watch this really closely because there have been a lot of questions thinking that the strap gets twisted in some way, and it doesn't, okay? So I am just right sides together, pinning the strap into the bodice like this, and then we'll get to the back strap in just a minute. Okay, so this finished edge here, the seam allowance, needs to match the dot on the side front bodice. Okay, so that means that you have a raw edge here and then the finished edge of the strap goes here. Okay, so this section here is where it's going to really start to curve. And this varies by cup size. There's more ease in the larger cup sizes, so you may need to do some clips into the side bodice so that it spreads to match the ease on the strap, okay? But like I said, you know, like the A cups, you don't really have a lot of curve there, so you'll probably just be able to pin this in no problem. Once you get up to the H cup, you're gonna have to do a little more pinning and maneuvering. I'm making a D cup, so I'm kind of like in the middle of the spectrum here, so you'll see I'm having to pin a little bit, but I think I'll be fine without actually clipping. Okay, so same thing on this side. I'm going to continue that, but let me just show you what happens with the back strap, all right? So this kind of continues up like this, all right? You can see that's where the shoulder is, and now this raw edge gets pinned to the raw edge of the back bodice, okay? And these meet at center back. So I did not twist anything, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. I'll hold this up so you can see. Okay, so again, this finished edge here on the strap, there is a circle for you to match it to. On the back bodice, all right, so I'm just gonna put a few pins here and then I'll lift this up so you can see how these have come together. Okay, so it's just, the strap is forming here. It's going to flip up after it's sewn at center front, becomes the shoulder, and then just continues flat to the back. Okay, so that's all there is to it. This does not need to twist. It should be very flat right there. Okay, and so I'm just going to continue pinning on the other side, and then you can probably guess what's coming next, and that is that we're going to machine baste these layers together. Okay, I've got the whole thing pinned. You can see how the strap is set into the front, and I'm just going to turn it over so you can see what the back looks like as well. Okay, beautiful V neck on the back here. All right, no twisting on the straps, and I'm just going to baste from center back all the way to the circle there, and again where it's pinned up front, and again our third section. Okay, so we're gonna go baste these layers together, and then we'll be ready to move on to the bra cups. Okay, we are on to the bra section. So this is page 25 of the Liz Dress booklet. So you can see I already constructed one. All right, so I just want to show you, it has the pleated upper piece, which is this piece here. There is a center lower cup, which is this piece, and then a side lower cup, which is this weird little wedge-shaped piece over here. Okay, so you also need to have handy the upper cup piece cut in your lining fabric. This is the stay. So this is what is going to help those pleats stay folded the way they need to be, so it's super important. Okay. This upper pleat is cut on the bias, which helps it curve around like that. We're going to form these pleats. I have found that it's helped me to draw in my pleat lines in pencil. Okay, we're going to be working from the front of the piece, but it's nice to have these as a reference to see where they need to match up. It's also super important to have your notches here, because that's what I go by on the front of the piece. Okay, so there should be 2 sets of notches here, which is your first set of pleat, your first pleat, and then 2 sets of notches here, which is your second piece. So on the first pleat, on the upper set, you are going to take the lower notch and bring it up to meet the upper notch, like that. Okay, and again, it's very important that you do this from the outside of the piece. I know you might think like, oh, I'll just turn it around and that'll make it easier. But then your pleats are going to be backwards. They're going to be going down rather than up. So I recommend doing it this way. For now, just pin the pleats closed in the seam allowance, okay? Don't worry about pinning along this line. I like to kind of check that I'm on track with where the pleats are. And then we're gonna like press this down very gently over at the iron. Okay, so again, same thing with the lower notch on the second set of notches. Bring it up to meet the upper notch. Pin it in place. Lower notch up to meet the upper notch and pin it in place. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is go over to the iron and just gently steam these into place. Now I like to kind of check my lines on the back because those lines are going to form the upper edge of each pleat. So you want to make sure, it's very easy with this to kind of get off and have like the pleats be not the right width, but if you have those lines to guide you, then you should be okay. Okay, so you can, if you want, just gently pin the center of the pleat. And I'm just going to double check the depth of my upper pleat here. Maybe I'll just give that a little pin, but I do not want to actually steam this with the pins in there because with chiffon, it will leave a pin mark, okay? So I am just really carefully making sure that all my layers are aligned here. And then I'm gonna go over to the ironing board and I'm just going to very gently steam these so that the pleats stay in place. You can see I've steamed these pleats down a little bit. I used a press cloth since I am using some pretty delicate fabrics here. The next thing we're going to do is put this section on top of the stay, like this. And you can pin it in place around the edges. Now the edges should match roughly. If they don't, it's very important that you don't pull the pleated piece so that it matches the stay, because then you're going to be pulling open the pleats and we want this, the stay is there to help the pleats stay closed. So I would say it's more important that everything is flat than that they match exactly at the edges. So just lay it and let it fall as it may, and then you can use the outer edge of the stay as your seam line, your seam allowance guide when stitching. Next thing I'm going to do is baste again around these outer edges to baste the stay to the pleated piece. So you can probably do this on the machine, depending on your fabric. I have found that with the chiffon and the layers that I have, it's just, it can start to, especially with the bias that we're working with here, it can start to get these weird little diagonal pulls here with the chiffon. So when I sewed the other one, I found that basting this by machine was not a good idea for me. So I'm just doing a little hand basting. Whoops, that's not right. Hand basting in the seam allowance next to my previous hand basting. And I'm going to baste these two pieces together and then we will move on to the next step. My upper cup is all basted, so now we're going to sew this vertical seam on the lower cup pieces. So you just need to put these right sides together, match the upper edges, and again, we've talked about this before, but you're not going to necessarily match at all edges here. You're going to match at the 5/8 of an inch seam line, so keep that in mind. Again, I'm going to match my lower edge like that, and then you just kind of distribute the excess in between the two. Okay, so I'm going to go stitch this seam. So let's head on over to the machine. I was on basting before, so I'm going to make sure I'm on my regular stitch length, about 2.5. I'm going to back stitch here, again using 5/8 of an inch seam allowances. Okay, and back stitching at the bottom. And I'm going to trim down this seam allowance here, so to about 1/4 inch before I press it open. You also might notice that we've got a bit of an outer curve going on here. So if you remember from earlier, we always notch outer curves. So about every 1/2 inch is fine. All right, that's plenty. And this is where a ham is going to come in handy. Remember a hammy? We are going to put the lower cup over hammy and kind of hold it nice and taut there. Grab your iron and just work the point of your iron in between your layers. So I have a lot of layers going on here. I want to make sure I'm going through the correct layers. So you can also kind of use your hand. I'm kind of trying to hold it up so you guys can see it too. So this is a little awkward, but I'm just going to a little steam. Now I can turn it around from the other side. And press this open. And this is where you're getting a funny little like triceratops sort of thing going on here. You've got like a little spiky humpback on your cup. So it looks like a funny little animal now. And so that when we turn it right side out, oops, I got a few little wrinkles here, so I'm just gonna press those out. If you see anything like that, you can just smooth it from the right side. I'm gonna use a press cloth just because the chiffon is so delicate. So I'm just gonna kind of smooth from the right side. But yeah, an organza press cloth is a great thing to have. Dritz makes them. I order them on Amazon all the time. You can probably find them at your local chain fabric store. Whoops, still got it. Okay, so I'm gonna keep refining this here. Hopefully I can smooth this out. This is an important part, to really take your time, and you don't want to see any wrinkles on the bra section. Ooh, that's hot. Oh my God, my iron is leaking onto my leg. I actually did get a really bad burn once on camera on my hand. I think this one, it's just a mild burn on my leg, so. Okay, let's go back to the table and we're going to sew the upper cup to the lower cup. Okay, we are now ready to sew the horizontal seam on the cup. So you can put the upper cup right sides together with the lower cup, and you're gonna wanna match that center notch to the lower cup seam. Then match these edges. So this is always my process when matching to things like this. So I match the notches first, any seams, and then the ends, and then I distribute. Okay, I know from experience that it is a little easier to sew this seam from the inside. You can see it's starting to really form a curved shape now, which is good. So you might want to orient your pins on the inside of the lower cup. Because when you go to sew, it's easier to kind of cup it in the machine like this rather than try to go this way. Okay, so now that this is pinned, I'm going to go back to the machine. I'm going to stitch this and trim, notch, and press it open. So I have sewn both cups now. You can see I pressed that seam open. So we've got two cups. We're going to sew them together at the center front seam. So you're just going to take both, put them right sides together, match that horizontal cup seam. So this is where I kind of like to use a pin to make sure the layers are matching here. And we're going to sew along this center front seam. What did I just do? I'm a little off. I matched a pleat to the seam. There we go. Let's try that. Let's try this again, everyone. You want to match the seam to the seam. And then the tricky thing about this is that you do want to match your pleat lines as well. So I'm just kind of making sure that each one matches and each pleat is right on top of each other. This part can be really tricky to sew. I always find matching pleat lines really complicated or just takes a few tries sometimes. So if you've ever sewn the Lemoore dress, you know there's that one pleat at center front. I know Melisha and I have had days where we had to re-sew that thing so many times to get the two sides of the pleat to match. So here you have a seam line and two pleats. So if you don't get it on the first try, just rip it out and go back. But hopefully mine will come out perfectly on the first try on camera. So when I have things like that I'm matching, I usually wait until the last possible second to take the pin out where I matched it. I'm usually a little better about removing my pins because I don't like to sew over pins. Okay, moment of truth. That's actually pretty good. There's one little kind of pucker there, but I think it's looking pretty good. Does it get the Melisha seal of approval? I think that's a yes. Okay, now I'm going to press the seam open. Try not to burn my leg off. I just want to be careful here. I can see I'm like inadvertently pressing the cup. I'm getting some little ripples. So I'm just going to smooth that out real quick. But what I'm focusing on here is the center front seam. Again, lots of basting going on here. This would be something I would want to take out. I'm not going to make you guys watch me do it on camera. But there are my center front pleats at my center front seam. Okay, next thing we're going to do is sew the cup lining, or excuse me, the bra lining to the bra. So I have already assembled my bra lining in my lining fabric. So you don't do the pleated pieces on the lining, you just use that flat upper cup piece. And so your center seam, and now we're gonna put the lining and the outer bra right sides together, and we're gonna stitch them along the upper neckline edge, okay? So we're going to match the edges here. Okay, so where I'm stitching is starting at this edge here. I'm gonna go to center front. There's a small pivot there. There's a little sweetheart point, and I'm gonna finish that side. So just along the upper neckline. Okay, so regular stitch length. Five-eighths of an inch seam allowance as usual. So I'm stopping at that center front seam, and there's a slight pivot here. So with the needle down, you want to pivot and then continue on the other side. Okay, the next few steps I'm going to do are really similar to things we've done already, so I'm just going to tell you what they are and then I'm going to go ahead and do them. We're going to grade these so that the lining is the shorter seam allowance and the outer bra is the wider seam allowance. We're going to then open this out. You might want to do a little notch there because this is a slight outer curve. Open this out and you're going to understitch the lining, okay, about 1/8 of an inch, and then we're going to press the whole thing in. So let me get through these steps and then we will talk about basting the lower edge of the cup together. Okay, I've understitched my neckline, and now I'm just going to roll this edge out and just press here to just get the neckline looking nice and crisp. So it should be looking nice. So definitely at center front, you want to make sure that you're really pressing in there. Okay, so that it doesn't accidentally pop out here, the lining. You don't want to see that on the outside of the dress, obviously. And yeah, you don't want to flatten this piece out, so I guess you can see that I'm just kind of like moving in little sections. You could put it over your ham too, but I'm finding it easier right now to press it flat on the board, so I'm just kind of moving it in sections as I need to. So there we go. I'm gonna need to kind of smooth out that chiffon there, but you get the idea. All right, so I am going to, next thing I'm gonna do is match the lower edges of the bra cup, of the entire bra, and pin these free edges together, the lining and the outer dress. Match your center front seam. One thing I wanted to mention too about the shape of this cup, you may notice here at this seam, which is the lower cup seam, that it dips in slightly. When you sew this to the cradle, that sort of underbust curve in the dress, that's going to straighten out. So don't worry if you see that. That was one of the things when I was working on this pattern. I kept seeing that dip and thinking it was a mistake with the grading or something like that. But what actually happens is it smooths out and it creates the room in the cup, which is actually pretty cool. So I learned a lot working on this dress. As you're probably getting the sense, there are a lot of like moving parts, and especially with all the different cup sizes we offer with charm patterns, the pieces can look wildly different from like an A cup up to an H cup, and from a size 2 to a size 20. So it was really interesting. We tested every single cup size I think we sewed in the studio to see how it came together, and it just looks so beautiful on so many different body types. Okay. So now I'm going to baste by machine along that lower edge where I've pinned. So I'm putting my stitch length up to like a 5. And I'm basting with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, the lower edge of the bra is now basted together. So the next thing we're going to do is go over to the table and work flat, and we're going to pin this into the bodice. All right, we've sewn the cups together. We've actually gotten ourselves to step 10 on page 27 if you're following along. So the next thing we're going to do is put this bra section into that underbust curve. So flip this down because you want to be working right sides together. Match your center front seams. Oh, I don't like that pin. Okay, there we go. And this finished edge is going to match the finished edge of the strap and that circle mark on the side front bodice. Okay, so it's not going to go all the way to the edge, but it should go about right there. Okay, you should have a notch to match to the lower cup seam here. And this again is another instance where this is just going to kind of curve in there, okay? And again, the higher the cup size, the more easing you're going to need to do. So you might need to do some clipping again on the that cradle curve section of the underbust if you're having trouble easing this in. But it looks like mine is going to fit pretty easily. You just have to kind of curve that shape in there. See, it's forming a pretty dramatic curve there. All right, so I'm going to continue pinning this in here on both sides. So again, just to demonstrate this again, this finished edge of the bra piece is going to match the finished edge of the strap and then the circle on the side front bodice. Okay, and now I'm just going to distribute that into the curve. So I've got a real dramatic curve shape going on here. And I'm going to go back to the machine, put it on a basting stitch, and I'm going to baste from here around the curve to that side. And then my bra will be set into my dress. All right, everyone, exciting news. We are now on lining the bodice, which is on page 27. So the bra is now set into the outer bodice, and I have sewn my bodice lining, which looked just like the outer bodice midriff and back. So you're just going to repeat those steps in your lining. The one thing I will say is a good idea to do is stay stitching along that inner curve of that cradle here at 1/2 inch, and then you can clip here if you need to when you're setting the bra in. Okay, so I'm just going to warn you that I know I said that the strap was the hardest part of this dress, but that might not have been entirely true. I might have been lulling you into a false sense of security because this step it's pretty tricky, okay? But I'm gonna walk you through every little step and it's going to be fine. Okay, so here's what's gonna happen. We're going to turn the bra section down. We're going to put this right sides together with the lining. So lining and the outer dress are right sides together, and the bra cups are like sandwiched in between the two. And you're gonna start pinning these together. Okay. So you can match those princess seams there. Match your center fronts. And here you're going to need to get the straps completely out of the way. Okay, so you should have that circle here, which matches the circle on this corner where the bra cup starts here, that we've matched a few things to already. So I'm going to come back and distribute this along here. So again, we're just kind of creating this inner curve. And then you're going to pin the back together. So let me go to this back point right here. Match the underarm seams. And I'm sorry if this just looks like a big mess of nothing right here, but I'm going to try to just really talk you through this, okay? So this is the back underarm curve. I'm going to pin this together. Okay, so this is your side seam here going up to the point of the back. And now I'm going to pin these together along the center back. And what is really tricky here
is you can see you've got the strap in here, and you've got to kind of smush it in between the layers here so that you don't catch the strap in your stitching. It has to be kind of rolled up between the layers. And this is what's kind of tricky because we're gonna have to stitch along here. There's a circle here, we're gonna pivot, pivot, and then stitch back down that way. But it's really hard to do this without accidentally catching the strap. So if you're just really mindful now as you're pinning and of where that circle is right there, that's gonna make it easier for you in the long run too. Okay, so now we're kind of pinning to center back here. I'm going to show you a cool trick at center back, which is like a clean finish trick. But for now, just leave it alone. Just kind of leave it open there. And I'm going to go around and continue pinning. Here's my center front bra curve. And if you want to just watch me do the other side, maybe seeing it twice will kind of help solidify how this works. Okay, so here's our strap. We're going to kind of get that out of the way. And I'm going to match my circles. This is at the front underarm and where the bra cup ends. And now I'm going to match everything together along the underbust curve here. And again, we're at the opposing side seam. So I'm going to match the side seams here. And then here's my center back. I'm sorry, not center back, but the back strap points would be a better way to describe that. My back underarm, which I'm now matching. And now here's my other strap, which I'm really going to try to roll out of the way so that it's smushed in that tiny little section right here. And when I'm stitching, I'll be very careful to try to keep the strap free of my stitching. And now here's our other back neckline. Okay, so you should be hopefully seeing your center backs all match. And now I'm going to turn the whole thing over and show you my little clean finish trick. I put this in all of the instructions for charm patterns, and it gives you a really nice clean finish with a lap zipper. Okay, so we're going to be inserting a lap zipper into this dress. So the right side of the back is going to be the underlap side, and the left side is the overlap side. And all of this, by the way, is on page 27, step 3, prepare lap zipper seam allowances at center back neckline. On the right side as you're working, you're going to take both of those seam allowances and turn them up together towards you 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to check that with my ruler. There are quite a few layers going on here, and I'm just going to pin that in place. Okay. Now on the left side, which is the overlap side, the lining and the dress are going to get turned in slightly different seam allowances. So the lining you can turn in 7/8 of an inch, and then the dress is 5/8 of an inch, okay? So they're slightly staggered. You're still turning every seam allowance up and out towards you as you're looking at the back lining. Okay, so that means that you're gonna get a little 1/4 inch gap between the two, which is just a little trick to help you when you turn this all right side in, the lining will clear the zipper, which if you've ever tried to do a lap zipper with a lining, you know that that's kind of the tricky part right here, is that the lining turns in and covers the zipper. So this is all to prevent that. So that's all there is to it, super easy. 7/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch on this side. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is go to the machine, and I'm going to stitch all the way around from center back
up to my back strap point, pivot, pivot, up to my front underarm corner, pivot, and then all the way around that curved edge and continue on to the other center back point. So let's head over to the machine. Okay, I'm ready to stitch. I am going to actually stitch my underbust curve in one line of stitching and then go back and do my center back. So this is a little tip that I mentioned in the instruction booklet. I find that it helps just to break up this a little bit. So you can start at the underarm, do your center bust curve, so from one end to the other, and then we'll go back and stitch the backs and the underarms. So regular stitch length. So you can start all the way at the raw edge, and we'll just, our stitching will kind of go like that when you do the other section. So there's a real curve to this section, because, you know, as you've seen the pattern piece, it's like that. So I will say it helps to kind of manipulate it with your hands to curve it over your sewing machine here so that it doesn't pucker, because there's a real 3D shape to this section right here. We're building a lot of curves into this dress. You hear Mr. Jingles over there begging for food. You hungry, Henry? Henry hasn't eaten in probably 6 hours, which is, now he's knocking stuff over. That's a real emergency for Henry. Okay, so as you sew around this curve, just hold it, you can kind of curve it up towards you too. And honestly, you might need to go back and pull some puckers out from here because we're working with a lot of layers, a lot of curves. So just do your best. You can always fix any little puckers later. Okay, and I'm going to sew all the way to this raw edge now. Okay, so I have sewn the entire front curve from underarm to underarm. And this is where you're going to want, I see I have a few little catches here, but I'm not going to worry about it now. I'm going to show you the next step of stitching, and then we can kind of fix everything later if you need to. Okay, so now that you've done the center front, you're going to go back and start at center back. And we're going to sew up to the back strap point where there are 2 pivot points. Remember, this is where you need to make sure that your strap stays kind of like smushed in there. And then we're going to sew around the underarm to meet that point where we started sewing. Okay, at center back, your seam allowances are turned in for that little trick that we did for the clean finish. So just keep them turned in and start stitching at the very edge of the fabric. Back stitch. This is my back V-neck. Okay, and as I'm sewing up towards the strap point on the back, I am just being really mindful and feeling the layers and making sure I'm not about to accidentally stitch my strap into this. Okay, so there is a circle here where you are going to pivot. So stop with your needle down, pivot, and we're kind of sewing flat across this upper back now. So just a couple stitches here. And then we're going to pivot again. So you're sewing up, pivoting, pivoting, and then back down. So it's like a weird little rectangular point. And now we're going to continue stitching along the underarm, and this is where, again, just be really careful that your strap is rolled out of the way. And I'm putting my finger in between the layers now, kind of move the strap out of the way of my stitching. Okay, so now I'm coming to my side seam. And this point can get a little crazy because everything can kind of start to pucker, and there's, again, just a lot of shape built in here. So I'm just kind of smoothing everything out. And then I'm sewing all the way to the raw edge over here, taking this out. Now I'm going to come back and finish the other side, obviously, because I've only sewn one back point, but I'm just going to kind of do what you want to do before you trim or grade or do anything. I'm just going to kind of show you what I'm talking about here, is you want to check to make sure that your straps were not caught in your stitching. And mine weren't, but it does look like I didn't get quite close enough to the clip point here. So I'm actually going to go back and stitch a little bit closer. So it's just a bit of a process here. You got to kind of do your stitching and then turn it right side out, and just to do a test to see if you stitched too close and caught your strap, or if you didn't stitch close enough and you have a raw seam allowance exposed at the clip point. So just kind of, be very patient with this part of the process and just check a couple times until you're really happy with it. I obviously need to finish the other side of my back and do this process on the other side too. So I'm going to keep doing this, and then we're going to come back for all of the grading and clipping and notching and everything. Okay, we are back. I've stitched around in my entire neckline, and I kept sort of testing the strap placement. On the other side, I had to go back like 6 times, I'm not gonna lie. So if you did too, it's okay. Just make sure you get it so that you're close to the strap, but not too close. It's just a delicate balance. All right, now that the entire thing is stitched, we are on step 5 on page 29. So we're going to grade our seam allowances. So the lining is going to be the shorter one, and then the layers can get progressively taller. So the lining is shorter, and then the dress is the taller one. Did I say that right? Yes, I did. Okay. All right. So I also want to let you know you're going to need to trim away these corners, like the back corner. This back strap point right here, you should trim across those corners and just really trim away any excess there. Same thing with this front underarm corner. So just kind of trim in there. There's a lot of layers going on there with the bra and the outer dress and the lining. Okay, so you're going to go around and you're going to trim all those little corners, and you're also going to grade. So again, the lining is the shorter one. Ooh. Let me try and neaten that up a little bit. And then the dress is taller, and again, a great way to kind of naturally grade this is to just hold your scissors at an angle towards you if you're doing several layers at once. So you're going to go around doing the seam allowances like that. You are going to clip into any curve, so the underarm curve, and then same thing with the under bust curve too. Okay, so let's do all those steps. I'm just gonna keep working on this, and then the next thing we're gonna do is turn the bodice right side out and go to the machine and understitch where we can. So that will be our next step. Okay, we're now gonna turn everything right side out. So you're just gonna pull out the straps in the back, turn the lining down this way. And now you can see what we've been working towards this entire time is this beautiful clean finish on the inside. So pull the straps out like that. So give yourself a pat on the back because that was a really challenging part. And the next thing we're going to do before we can move on to the skirt is to understitch. So you're just going to understitch the back neckline, the underarm, the other underarm, and the other back neckline. So we have to do 4 different stages of understitching. So I'm just going to start at this. I'm just going to pick one back neckline. And I'm going to start this way, and just like we've done before with understitching, you're going to make sure your seam allowances are underneath your lining. You're holding the 2 layers taut, and you're going to start stitching, and you're stitching about 1/8 of an inch, a little less away from the seam line. Okay, so you're going to go as far as you can. You've ever seen in pattern instructions, it says understitch as far as you can, and you've wondered what that means. It's usually because you're going to get to a point where you can't go any farther. So in the case of this neckline, you are going to get to a point here where the strap starts to narrow at the back neckline, and you're not going to be able to get any further here. So I'm just going to go as far as is comfortable, back stitch, and then break my stitching. Trim away the thread, and then I'm going to go on to my next section of understitching, which would be the underarm. So just a little section right here. Hattie, what are you doing? You got something on your nose. Hattie's checking her food bowl, just making sure there's nothing, not a little scrap left over from this morning. Okay, so we are going to now do the underarm. And this is a really challenging little section because it's just very small and very tight quarters right here. And again, just go as far as you can. I'm at about my side seam right here. Okay, so there's that underarm. Okay, so then on the other side of the dress, I'm going to do the other arm and the other back neckline. Okay, so, and then the final thing you'll do, and let me just show you this side, would be to just kind of press everything in, press the lining in, press the lining in. At the underarm, you know, do your little move where you're pushing out the lining to the edge. And so remember to repeat all that on the other side. And I'm going to let you all sew your skirts on your own because this part is fairly easy, and if you've gotten this far, I'm pretty sure you know how to sew a gathered skirt. So you're going to sew your skirt pieces, gather them, sew them to the waistline of the dress, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do our lapped zippers together because I really want to show you the technique for that. So I will see you in a little bit. We're back. I have a skirt on, which is very exciting. It's definitely looking like a dress now. We're going to put our zippers in. So I wanted to talk you through the process of a lap zipper a little bit before I start to sew. Again, the right side of the dress is the underlap side and the left side is the overlap side. So we're going to sew the zipper to the right side, and then there'll be a slight overlap here, and then top stitching on the left side. So that's what forms the overlap. Okay, so to prep for your zipper, you are going to want to press in your seam allowances on the zipper opening from top to bottom, or until the opening on the skirt. So your skirt should be stitched until the zipper circle, and then open from there up to the waistline. So you have a full zipper opening here. Okay, so on the right side, as you look at the dress, this seam allowance is going to be turned in 1/2 an inch, okay? So that's a little bit less than your usual 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's because you want to set the zipper just slightly in, okay? So the left side, you're gonna use your full 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? It's like this on every pattern with a lap zipper. This is how it's always done. So 1/2 an inch on the right side, 5/8 of an inch on the left side. Okay, so I always start, I have like a process I like to do with lap zippers. I always pin flat, so I start with the underlap side, pin it flat on the table, then we're going to go to the machine and stitch it. We're gonna come back to a flat surface, we're gonna pin the overlap side, and then go back to the machine and stitch that side. So you're kind of moving back and forth between your flat surface and your sewing machine. I did want to show you just one thing I've done a little differently on my dress because I have this chiffon outer layer. I did the Radiance, the sort of ivory cotton and silk blend for my skirt lining.
And because I know from experience working with these kinds of fabrics, it really doesn't look good if you have a lapped zipper top stitched on chiffon. So the way, I used to actually work in bridal gown restoration for a little while, and that was an experience, but I did learn a lot from it. And one of the things that I learned is if you have an overlay like this in lace or something like that with a zipper going down the center back seam, you don't want to stitch the zipper into that, or the lace or the sheer into that seam. You want to leave it free like this. So you're just going to turn in those seam allowances, and then they should end at the center back. So this is going to be like a little open flap here. I'm going to stitch down to the waistline, and then I'm going to stitch the zipper just to the lining in the skirt. And that's going to prevent any weird puckering and bunching at the sort of tail end of the zipper in that gathery chiffon fabric, and it just looks a lot nicer. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we are going to grab our zipper, and you're going to kind of see where the zipper naturally bends under at the top here, and that is where you want to place this right under the finished edge of the V-neck, so like right here. And then you're going to release that zipper tape so it's kind of like free. And also I just want to say you're going to keep the bodice lining free in all of this. Okay, so I'm going to open my zipper a little bit, and you're just going to put the fold of the right side of your dress over the zipper so that the fold is just next to the zipper teeth like this. And then you're going to pin next to the teeth. Okay, I'm going to do this all the way down. So this little neckline band is going to get stitched into your zipper stitching. Okay, and below the waist, I am just pinning the lining, which you can see here. And then this is going to just be kind of a free hanging little opening. And the tail of the zipper can just get tucked in. I have a lot more tail than I really need, so I probably should have trimmed my zipper beforehand, but I can always do it afterwards too. So again, the fold is right next to the teeth, and you are placing your pins right on the fold down into the down till you get to the base of the zipper opening in the skirt. Okay. All right, so let's go on over to the machine, and we are going to stitch right next to the fold. Okay, I like to have my zipper about halfway open for this side, and then we'll close it when we get close to the pull. I have put my zipper foot on my machine. My Bernina has this really narrow kind of zipper foot where you have to move the needle to either side of the zipper foot that you want to stitch on. That's kind of unusual, so you probably have one where you have to move the foot to either side of the needle. So in any case, you're going to want to have the needle to the left of the foot when you're starting, and I always stitch from top to bottom on both sides. So we're stitching the underlap side, and you're going to start just above your zipper stop here. And when you know where you want to start, I would say lower your needle before you lower your presser foot, and that kind of helps you situate yourself. And then I like to kind of use my left hand to hold the back very taut like this. And we're going to start stitching, and I'm just stitching like pretty close to the fold, as close to the fold as possible, but you don't want to be like exactly on the edge. So I would say like maybe a 1/16 of an inch you're top stitching. Okay, so we're going to continue down in this way, stitching really close to the fold, taking your pins out as you stitch. And just a note on why I put my pins in this way, I like to have the heads closest to me so that I can pull them out easily. And as you're stitching this lap zipper, just like keep everything nice and flat. And I like to use, Henry, what are you doing? I use my left hand to give myself a nice flat surface here.
especially with these layers of chiffon and charmeuse and all that. Hey, Mr. Jingles. You just want to keep everything as flat and taut as possible. Okay, now I'm getting close to my waistline seam, which is where I can keep going. I want to just make sure that I don't get this chiffon overlay caught in my stitching, but I have enough space right here on this side that I'm just going to keep stitching, just like you're going to keep stitching on yours. I am going to close my zipper pull now, so with my needle down, I'm going to lift up my presser foot and close the zipper. So it's now out of the way. I'm going to keep this chiffon layer out of the way. And now I'm just stitching on the lining. Again, this is unusual to my dress because I had to have my fantasy dress. So I'm doing a couple different things than you would be doing if you were just sewing in a regular non-sheer fabric. I'm going to keep stitching until we get to the very base of this zipper opening. And you can see I'm almost down to where the seam line starts, where the zipper opening opens up. So I'm going to back stitch here. And that's it for this side. So we're going to go back to our flat surface and we'll pin the overlap side. All right, so we're back on our flat surface. We're going to pin our overlap side. Okay. So we're going to take that folded in seam allowance, put your little zipper pull down, and this will cover. So I recommend starting by matching your waistline seam here. So you're going to have your seam, your fold should just cover the line of stitching that you did on the underlap side that we just did. Okay, so you're just taking the fold and it's covering your line of stitching like that. I'm matching the waistline seam and now I'm pinning to the left of the zipper teeth, okay? And I'm pinning through the zipper tape. Okay, so I'm putting my hand between the layers so that I'm just pinning through the seam allowances and the zipper tape. Okay, there are a few more match points on this bodice. You're gonna want this V to match here, the base of that strap that we work so hard to sew. And take that collar off, Henry. Okay. So just continue to pin like this. So you can see I'm kind of forming that overlap as I'm pinning. So I'm just pinning to the left of the teeth. If you want to test this, the way that you've pinned it, try to open your zipper, and if you can't open it, that means that you've pinned too close to your teeth or even on the wrong side of your teeth. So that's a very common mistake, so just look out for that. Okay, so the top, we're going to start our top stitching over here at the very top of the neckline, and then we're going to be top stitching at 3/8 of an inch right here. Now, I'm going to pin the rest of it from the waist down now, and again, I'm just going to pin through my lining, not through my chiffon overlay. Okay, so I'm going to pin this all the way down. It gets a little tricky because you have to work between the layers like this, but it's definitely doable. It's just kind of hard to show you sometimes. So I'm just going to keep pinning with my hand between the layers. Until I get to the base of the zipper opening, which is right here. And I like to give myself a little horizontal pin right here to remind myself that that's where I'm going to do my pivot, because I'm going to stitch until I get to that horizontal pin, and then I'm going to pivot and then stitch horizontally across the base of the zipper. Okay. All right, that looks good. So I'm just going to kind of smooth everything out so you can see. Whoops. So you should be able to close and open your zipper. And you're going to start with your zipper all the way down, okay? On this side, you want it to be all the way at the bottom here. Okay, so we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to top stitch the overlap side. I'm going to switch my needle to the other side of my foot now, because we are now stitching on the right side of the presser foot. And I'm going to start top stitching at the very upper edge of my neckline. And this top stitch should be at 3/8 of an inch. And you want to be really careful here that you're not going to stitch over your metal stop. So that's why I'm kind of checking and double checking what I'm doing. I also will use my hand wheel for a few stitches up here, because I hate breaking needles. It like scares me every time. Okay, so I'm going to back stitch here. And now I'm just going to hold everything nice and taut. And get a nice smooth surface to work on here. Take your pins out as you go. Stitching at 3/8 of an inch. Okay, now when I get to my waistline seam, I'm going to break my stitching. You are not going to break your stitching, because you are probably not sewing a Debbie Reynolds chiffon fantasy dress, though you might be. But if you're not doing the chiffon overlay like I am, you're just going to keep stitching to the bottom. I am going to, did I backstitch? I can't remember. Anyway, we'll check on that later. I think I backstitched. Anyway, I'm going to lift up this overlay here, and I'm going to restart my stitching below the overlay, just in the lining. And I'm just holding the chiffon out of the way. So you would be sewing this into just your outer skirt and holding your skirt lining out of the way. So we're kind of reversing how this is normally done. But yeah, if you lined your skirt, then you're just kind of keeping the skirt lining out of your stitching here. All right, you can see I'm almost at the base of my zipper opening. You can see my horizontal pin that I put there. You can see my zipper pull. When I get really close, like about there, I'm going to stop with my needle down, lift up the presser foot, and close the zipper just a little bit. And now you're going to finish off the zipper top stitching. I'm going to continue my top stitching until I get to my horizontal pin, stop with my needle down, lift up my presser foot, and I'm just going to stitch horizontally across the base there. And my zipper is in. So that wasn't so bad, was it? Even in chiffon. Okay, so the zipper is in, and I have a bunch of stray threads and stuff here, but you should see, and actually I'm going to need to turn that in a little bit more, but you'll see the next steps are going to be to turn in the lining. And so let's go to the flat surface and I'll show you how to do that part. Okay, our zipper is done. The next thing you're going to do is to do a clean finish on the inside of the dress
by turning in your bodice lining. I always like to do a line of stay stitching around the waistline on the bodice lining so that I then have a very clear reference point for where to turn it under. Right, so I'm going to just kind of pin this, turn in the seam allowance and pin it so that you're hiding those seam allowances underneath there, like that. So all the way around the waistline. So see how nice and clean that finish is going to be? And then same thing on the zipper opening. You're going to turn in your seam allowance, and then you're going to need to turn down these little tape edges at the top here and just kind of sandwich them in there. And then you're going to do little pins here down to the waistline like that. Okay, so this will all be turned in. You'll get a completely clean finish of the lining, and you're going to do a little hand stitch down the zipper tape and around the waistline. Okay, and then the final thing to do will be to hem your dress. So there's some hemming suggestions in the instruction booklet. Okay, so you can just take a look at page 35. You're going to want to let it hang for a little bit. And then even up your hem if you need to, make any adjustments to the length. And then you can do a little narrow hem on both the skirt outer and the skirt lining. Okay, so I should mention, there are also instructions in the booklet for the waist tie and the little fringes on the ends. We're not going to be going over those today, but they're fairly easy to do. So if you're interested in doing that cute little vintage inspired detail, definitely check out pages 36 to 37 in the instructions. So that's it, everyone. That's the end of the Liz dress for today, which I kind of can't believe because we've been talking about doing this tutorial for so long. And as you can see, it is a pretty involved dress, but I hope you really loved making it and sewing along. And I'm so excited to show you what we have coming up next. Okay, everyone, at the end of each episode, we like to tell you a little bit about what is going on in Gertie's world this month. So I'm very excited. I'm sure you've heard me talk to Melisha off camera a little bit now, and I finally got her out here to meet you. This is the lovely Melisha.
Hi, everyone.
Assistant designer at Charm Patterns. So we wanted to show you what we worked on this month for Patreon, and you can probably see a little theme going on here with us and the mannequin. We are modeling the Peter Pan Bolero, which is our exclusive Patreon project for this month. So if you would like to get the pattern for this and learn the techniques that we use to make it and do these little embellishments, you have a lovely little diamante Swarovski detail on the collar. And then as well as this variation here with the faux fur collar and these fun little pom-poms. So these are really fun to make, and I'm sure you've been pretty amused watching me learn the process for making faux fur pom-poms in the studio. So we had a lot of fun making these this month, and so much fun showing you the Liz dress as well. So please come back for the next episode, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye.